Good morning. Today is May 8th, 2025, and welcome to the New Possibilities Hour, part of the Will Work for Food project founded by Natalie Armstrong Motan. Every Thursday morning, Jean Lawler, David Schraga, and I host another really information and fun-filled webinar for mediators, arbitrators, lawyers, and everybody who negotiates. As you probably know by now, there's no charge for these great webinars. Rather, we ask you to contribute to a food bank if you like what you see. And every week, one of my favorite parts of the webinar is when we announce the running total of just how much our generous audiences have contributed since we began the series 5 years ago. And I am delighted to announce that this week, our running total has reached $810,931.21. It's a magnificent show of generosity by our audiences and by our great speakers in whose honor people have contributed. Thank you very much. Today, we have another terrific program for you, Settlement of Complex Insurance Claims, the Broker's Vital Role. Today, we're going to dive into the intricate world of complex insurance claims. The presentation will explore the dynamic landscape of being a broker in the London market, highlighting how brokers serve as essential intermediaries in the claims process. We will gain insights into the critical skills required to manage relationships with both clients and insurers, ensuring transparent communication and effective resolution strategies. We will examine some real-world case studies that illustrate the art and science of negotiating losses, showcasing how expert brokers can transform challenges into opportunities. Join us to learn how leveraging deep market expertise and strategic negotiation can lead to more favorable outcomes in complex claims settlements. And who better to present this than Mona Barnes? Mona is the Global Chief Claims Officer for Aon, one of the world's largest insurance brokerages. And Mona has previously worked as Global Head of Key Case and Large Loss Management, Property and Casualty at Swiss Re. She had worldwide responsibility for the firm's largest losses across all lines of business. She's passionate about claims, delivering exceptional value to clients, thought leadership, and mentoring young talent in the insurance industry. Outside of work, she has twin daughters. She enjoys traveling, and she keeps fit by playing squash. How very British. So, from London, England, please join us in welcoming Mona Barnes. Mona, please tell us a little bit about the food bank to which you would like people to contribute if they're in a position to do so. And then on with the presentation. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you so much, Jeff. I didn't realize squash was so British, but it keeps me fit, so it's good. Well, thank you very much for inviting me to speak today. It's just been fantastic learning about your group and all the great work that you're doing and the difference that you're making to the food banks in US. And I'm delighted that I've managed to add on a UK one as well. To the effort. So I know it's been a really tough few years as people went through COVID. Many people in our communities who lost their jobs and had other challenges. So they now rely on these critical food banks to help them get through with their families as well. So I made a contribution to a group called Trussell. Trussell is a UK-based food bank. It's actually a collection of food banks. It has 1,400 food banks that they support. And if anyone's looking for a food bank to make a contribution to, I'd really like to nominate the Trussell Group. It's, as I was reading about food banks, I found out that 1 in 7 people in the UK are facing hunger, which I was staggered by. I didn't know that. So yeah, and the amount that you've raised is amazing. So thank you very much for letting me nominate one.
Thank you.
Great. Okay, so I thought that I would spend a little bit of the time that we've got together talking about, the role of a broker in the insurance claims chain. And I think many of you might know what brokers do, but for those that might not, I thought I'd give a bit of an introduction as well. The landscape, in my view, is changing, especially on the claim side. So, as brokers, we are intermediaries in the insurance chain, and we're working with clients typically before a claim ever happens. So they are buying insurances for various things, and it will depend on which area of business they're in. So, for example, banks might be buying various insurances for their directors and officers, or perhaps for their premises. Might be public liability insurance. I mean, there's a myriad of insurances that large corporates buy these days. Energy companies might be buying insurance for their production sites. A homeowner might be buying insurance for their house. So it is very, very varied, the types of things that we end up getting involved in, and also the demographic of the clients that we deal with. So the client journey for us typically starts many, many months, and actually sometimes years in advance before they might have a claim. And so our clients are typically looking to us as advisors on what kind of insurances they need in place, what limits of liability they should buy, what type of deductibles should they select, what price should they pay. And very importantly, they're looking for guidance from us on which insurances they should place that business with. So not only which insurance, but also insurers. So when they finally do have a claim, they know that we're there to help them work through that. Some of our clients are really experienced, and so they're very detailed about what they're looking from us. They might already know what type of cover they need in place. They might also know which insurers they like working with. Perhaps they've had prior experience with them, and they might want to stay with those insurers. And one of the things that I've observed in recent years is that more and more clients are placing an importance on claims, because claims, in my view, is the product that we're out there selling. And so a number of them have had experiences with their own claims, and they want to make sure that they've got the best insurers and the best brokers to partner with, because they know that that symbiotic relationship is critical in solving their claims when they face them. So some clients who are focused on their claims want to know specific things about insurers. For example, which insurers are looking to partner with clients and pay claims quickly, for example, or which ones are likely to instruct a lawyer straight off the bat and make their claims teams work in a very legal or technical way. Not that that's a bad thing, but they're just different approaches that insurers will take. And others will ask us, how do we guarantee that we get a payment under that insurance? So that's a difficult one, because typically with an insurance, it is a contract. The contract has to be met in order for provision of payment to be made. But there are guarantee type insurances, such as parametric insurances, or there may be treaties. So, for example, Aon has a number of treaties which get triggered, and we have follow insurances. And I might be using some UK or London-based terms here, so I'll try and explain as I go along, because not all of them will exist for US clients. So, the London markets are relatively unique because Lloyd's of London is the oldest insurance market in the world, and we have very complex and unique insurances that get placed here. And the way that we operate is also unique. The way insurers will operate is unique. We have a system whereby if business is placed through Lloyd's, they have a very structured approach. They have a lead, and in some cases, two leads, and follow markets. Now, with Aon client treaties, the Aon client treaty is a true follow form those insurers don't get to make their own decisions. They're following the decision of the lead underwriting company. So that's another way that you can guarantee that those insurers will follow the lead position. It's not a kind of parametric, a different stance to it, but to some extent you get a more guaranteed outcome. So ahead of us taking on a client, we might be doing claims workshops with them so they have a really good understanding about what insurers might ask them when they've got a claim and how they need to respond. So what does a policy require them to do? Do they need to notify a claim within a certain time frame? Does their insurer take control of their defense, for example? Or do they need to keep documents? Because in the event of a crisis, most insurers are going to be looking for evidence and details of what losses have been incurred and sometimes paid by the insured before they go to their insurers. Ideally, it should be ahead of time, but it's not always possible. So we've got excellent relationships with our insurers. It really is, as I was saying before, a symbiotic relationship between our clients, our insurers, and ourselves. And so we regularly are giving feedback to insurers through our voice for the client feedback. So we are telling our insurers how they're ranked against others and where they're excelling, as well as any other areas where they can do better. So there are situations, though, unfortunately, where the two sides just can't reach an agreement on how that policy should work in terms of insurance coverage. Or we might have situations where insurers say, well, there is cover, but actually we don't agree on the amount that this claim is worth and the amount that we're going to settle this at. And that's really where the role of a claims broker comes into sharp focus, because we do get heavily involved where insurers and our clients can't resolve a coverage dispute. An insurer might have declined cover. Alternatively, there might be a disconnect between those insurers. So some insurers might be disputing insurance cover, others might not be. Some insurers might value a claim at a certain amount, others might not. And that's the complexity, I guess, of large insurance towers when they're placed. And Jeff, I know you wanted me to speak about a couple of examples. So I picked two, which one in UK, one in US, just so that it's closer to home. In fact, much of what we do is US driven, I'm afraid. Some of it is UK, a lot, some in Asia, but really, I think, US, you guys like to litigate. So we had a recent case in UK where there were around 15 insurers, it might be more, on the tower. And the client had a full tower loss. They had a very big tower, and it was a full tower loss from their perspective. But some insurers were saying that according to UK law, each one of those cases would attract a separate deductible. And so therefore, the entire cost of the claim would fall to the client because those losses didn't aggregate. Now, insurers immediately instructed their legal counsels to advise them through that. And that meant the client felt they needed also to have their legal counsel to make sure that they were answering the questions that the insurers were asking. So both sets of lawyers have been speaking about what information they need, but unfortunately, those discussions just became stuck. Ultimately, the client reached out to Aon claims teams to say, could you help us unlock this impasse? The good thing I think about brokers getting involved is we really can have an open and transparent dialogue with our insurer partners and sometimes even the lawyers, because I think that typically where lawyers are speaking to other lawyers, they're adversarial by nature. They're looking to protect their client's position, and we are looking to resolve. And I'd like to think that they're all looking to resolve, but we don't always find that to be the case. And ideally, we don't want clients, and neither do insurers, want to end up in mediations and arbitrations unless it really is an unresolvable situation. So we did get involved, and we were able to have a very open discussion with the insurers that were there. I also spoke to the lawyers that were involved because I knew them, and they were looking to make sure, the insurers were looking to make sure that they were able to pay claims in light of the advice that they had received, which was that the claims weren't necessarily indemnifiable in the way that the client had presented them. But there were legal opinions on both sides, as there often are. And it was for us to try and navigate our way through and help the insurers to find a way to be able to actually pay under the insurances that they had for those clients. So it helped us to get rid of the claims, get many of them settled, and cut through that legal posturing, and explain to our insurers why every single one of those claims wasn't separate or didn't aggregate to form many claims. And that meant that the client didn't have to take the matter to a coverage arbitration in the end, which they were considering doing. And it was good for all the parties involved because the client is renewing their insurance, and the insurers also ultimately avoided the costs of an arbitration, and they got new business. So we're really looking for it to be a long-term relationship with clients and, of course, with insurers who we deal with regularly. And then I had another example, which was in the States, in a judicial hellhole, as it's known. We had a really difficult situation last year, actually, where our client was facing litigation, and the insurers refused to settle a claim due to a very inflated amount that was being charged. At least that was their view. It was an inflated amount. I'm sure the plaintiffs disagreed and said it was a completely fair amount that was being charged. So unfortunately, though, due to the climate of US nuclear verdicts and often litigation funders playing a part in that, our client was really concerned that their insurers might actually make a decision not to settle the claims, and that they could be exposed for amounts that were above policy limits. So the lawyers who were instructed on behalf of the insurers were advising the client to go to trial and then potentially appeal. And the more difficult thing was that there weren't just one set of lawyers, there were numerous sets of lawyers. Each carrier had gone out and instructed their own set of lawyers. So it really became a very difficult situation for the client to try and manage both the ongoing litigation and then also trying to answer the questions from the numerous lawyers, the numerous questions that they were asking of them. So their counsels ended up spending a lot of time trying to answer the coverage queries rather than focusing actually on the defense, which was obviously the main part of what they needed. So they asked Aon to get involved and speak to the insurers. So we really had to get heavily involved in that one because we turned up for the mediations, we prepped the clients ahead of time, we spoke to all of the insurers on a one-to-one basis regularly, and we managed their expectations that the client was looking to settle the claims ahead of that trial. They weren't looking to go to trial, and they weren't looking to then appeal again. And we spoke to their lawyers as well as having regular calls with them as a market. And that meant that the client could then concentrate on their defense, and also that any questions from the lawyers and their insurers were triaged in a way that they could manage with their own lawyers. And we were advising them each step of the way. And our experience in mediations means that we know exactly what prior authority a client's going to need. We often know the mediators or arbitrators that are turning up for these. Many of the individuals that we employ in our claims teams are non-practicing lawyers. They might have been senior associates or partners before they joined us, as well as industry professionals. So, we have a deep network and expertise in the market that we're operating in, which really does help us. And in that occasion, we were thankfully able to convince the insurers that it wasn't the case that should be taken to a trial, because there was a very significant risk of a nuclear verdict being reached. And so, based on our experience as brokers, we've seen a number of these cases ending up at trials where a jury will give an adverse verdict, and a very significant adverse verdict with quantum attaching to it. So Ultimately, the claims were settled and those matters didn't go to trial, and the client was very relieved and pleased with the outcome. So we think it was a really good outcome for the insurers as well, because although they paid for the claims, they actually prevented themselves from having to potentially pay a much larger amount had the issue gone to trial and an adverse verdict being delivered. It also meant that they didn't then have to pay ongoing defence costs. They were no longer spending that money on the lawyers also advising them on coverage. So once again, that client renewed their business, and they're looking to place more business with those markets who partnered with them. So what was a significant event, we managed to turn into a really great opportunity. So one other thing I thought would be good to mention is really, the skills for a claims team. So I touched on, talent and background, and how do we actually get these issues resolved? I'm making it sound probably quite easy that we, spoke to the insurers and we've managed to get it resolved. It's obviously significantly involved. Many hours, weeks, months, sometimes years of work goes into this. And I would say probably two really important skills that I think my claims teams need is the ability to understand our clients' needs, to predict how a situation is going to unfold. So, for example, is there going to be a nuclear verdict? Are insurers going to be wanting to pay that? Where there are significant amounts at stake, and how do we make sure the right outcome is achieved whilst everyone works in the same direction? And ideally mitigating or preventing that situation if clients and insurers or lawyers are entrenched in those positions. And then the other one is understanding insurers and what they will need to help them. So sometimes I think insurers get a bit of a bad rap, but actually I think most of them are really looking to make sure they're doing the right thing. They're passionate about what they're doing. They want to make sure they're paying the right claims, and they don't like surprises, which might sound like a strange thing given that they're in the business of risk. But they really want to know in advance what is happening. So that build-up of trust with the client early on is really important. And our solid network with those insurers is probably what helps us the most, because we know who to reach out to when there might be an issue. We know who our counterparts are, and we've got a very formatted escalation process. So if a matter gets stuck at a country level, for example, with claims teams, we internally can escalate to our regional head of claims. If something gets stuck at a regional head of claims level, then the regional claims teams can reach out to me or others on my team in a global capacity to try and unlock what's happening at a global head of claims level. And so that escalation procedure works really, really well for us, and also well for the insurers as well. And we invest a heck of a lot of time getting to know insurers, getting to know lawyers, getting to know our adjusters. There are so many parties that are involved in these large scale insurance events. It's quite important to know who counterparts are, because that's often what unlocks the communication impasse. And of course, the last one and an important one is knowing mediators and arbitrators. And so we do that, though, usually through our experience of going to those mediations and arbitrations. And so when our clients are involving us early on, we get a good working relationship with them, and they get a good working relationship with us, as well as understanding what their insurers will want. And usually when they're stuck in the middle of facing a large scale litigation, they're not necessarily thinking about insurance first. They're really relying on us to help them to navigate their way through the situation. So that's where the kind of upfront training for our clients comes in, making sure they understand the process and gain maximum amount of our experience as well. So hopefully that gives a bit of a whistle-stop tour of some claims examples, experiences, and the role that a claims broker plays in the whole value chain of litigation. I
That's
don't
a,
know.
that's a
Oh,
that's a fantastic bird's eye view of it all. And let me ask you some questions. You spent many years on the insurance carrier side. Swiss Re, I believe you were Chubb when you and I first met each other. Uh, Now that you're on the broker side, what advice would you give to people on the carrier side? What do you know now that you wish you had known then that would have made you even more effective as a representative of insurance carriers?
yeah, I love that question. I think it's a brilliant question. Actually, I get asked it quite often by old colleagues on the insurance side, and it, the reason I love the question is because the carrier is thinking about the end client, and actually, often when you're at the insurance side, although you are thinking about the client, you're not the broker sitting right in front of the client on a day-to-day basis, having to answer those questions about why did the insurer go off and instruct XYZ counsel, or why have they taken this position? And so I would say actually really open communication is, it sounds basic, but it really is what the client's looking for. Regular communication and open communication. And probably the bit that frustrates the most is receiving advices which have been sent by lawyers that are not helpful, and feeling that they're at an arm's length and their insurer has left them when they needed them the most, which is often not the case at all. But it's the impression that it may create. So I would say that's probably one piece of advice. There's I'm sure lots more.
So then what is the appropriate relationship and role of the carrier's counsel there? You seem to be expressing a concern that the conversations are too lawyered up. Communications may come across as too cagey or clever, and yet the lawyers have a legitimate role in making sure that rights are protected from the carrier side, no inappropriate admissions made. What could lawyers do better?
Mhm. I think it's very difficult. I think for lawyers to take any different approach because they're doing exactly what they are paid to do, which is making sure that their clients' rights are protected. Whereas actually the relationship between an insurer, a broker, and a client is much closer than a lawyer that doesn't have a long-term vested interest in making sure that the client is happy. So I would say that uh, rather than even if you are receiving legal advice, it's always great for the insurer to be putting their name on a letterhead and sending that to the client and being able to be open, where a broker is picking up a phone to say, can we chat? And we do all the time, of course, but not to say, oh, actually, we're just waiting for our lawyer's opinion, which might well be the case, but proactive and the optics are very important for clients who are obviously in a highly sensitized situation. They are looking at perhaps a factory having burnt down, or perhaps they're in the middle of a litigation and they're facing a significant claim, and an insurance that they might have placed years ago or months ago, they're now looking to call on, and they can't get in touch with their insurer. I mean, that's what we try and smooth along the way and make sure that the client is looked after, being heard, and then we try and make sure that the insurers are contactable and communicating in a really open and transparent way, which they want to do, but equally they're concerned about protecting their position. I think the other piece is that London, for example, and I think to some extent the US as well, but London has historically always been a very face to face and open communication market. And I think what's happened is that over the years, we've become more and more reliant on lawyers and become less reliant on our internal claims teams, making sure that they're equipped and being given the authority to be able to have those conversations. Um, Even if they are getting legal advice behind the scenes, which is absolutely fine, and we understand that. But be the face of your company, and not be behind lawyers, if I can put it that way.
But Mona, has that changed since the pandemic? Because I remember my first trip to London and being in the Lloyd's building and seeing how everything works in that basically just a few square blocks there in the Lloyd's district. You can see that everybody's talking to each other and they all know each other and they hire each other and each other's relatives, and it's all very close. When everybody went home during the pandemic, did that change the environment in the London market?
Yeah, I would say it absolutely did. It's coming back to where it used to be. So certainly at Aon, broking is a very face-to-face community. That's how we do business, and insurers as well, but certainly brokers. So we are, and as you say, Jeff, London is a very close-knit market. You're sort of tripping over your friends as soon as you walk out of the walk out of the building, which is a very nice thing. But it does mean that people have to be in the office, and I understand that some insurers are still getting up to that kind of, how many days are you in the office type of dialogue. Whereas actually on the certainly at Aon, I can speak for, it's been, we probably don't have enough desks when people are coming in. So we've got the opposite issue, and we're looking at how do we get more desk space, because obviously through COVID, people were looking at, well, do we need all these desks? And actually that was not probably the right environment to assess it by. It's when everyone's back, do we have enough desks? So yeah, I mean, that changed, that people are not quite as willing to do face to face. I'm not sure if it's not willing, or whether it's they feel unable, or they're perhaps not feeling quite as confident about it. There's probably a lot of psychology that sits behind all of the behavioral things that are going on. But I did see a shift. And obviously, through COVID, as many carriers went out and needed to protect their position in something that was such a huge event for the industry, and for some insurers, really probably threatened their existence in terms of the exposures that they were facing. They needed lawyers, and they needed to make sure that they were dotting every single I and crossing every T. That was the right thing to do. But I think it almost, and this is just my impression, but it almost perhaps has created a sense of unease that we could ever make the decisions by ourselves. I mean, ultimately, I would say that the insurance carrier is the one that has issued the contract. And ultimately, although lawyers are there as advisors to those insurance carriers, the decision is ultimately theirs. And it would be good to get ourselves back into that really dynamic workspace that we had prior to the pandemic, both from a, face-to-face meetings, which are gaining traction again, but also perhaps thoughtful instruction of lawyers, rather than we need it because otherwise, we won't protect our position. I think someone has their hand up.
It's Peter Silverman. You had your hand raised. Please
Yeah.
go ahead.
So I found this fascinating. I have four short questions for you. One, I've never thought of the broker as really an advocate in the sense you're talking about it. So it's very enlightening. Should a broker ever attend a mediation and sit in the claimant's room? First question. Second question is,
I have to scribble some notes so I make sure I
okay.
address all the questions.
A second question is overlapping verification. That when you get layers, especially with London, each layer says, well, I need to verify this, I need to verify that, and it ends up lengthening the process considerably. And is it proper to ask a broker to say, can you work with them to have one verification process? Third is, as a broker, you have a split loyalty. your loyalty is to your client, but the real world is you have to have a good relationship with carriers to persuade them to write the kind of do the underwriting you want. How should a claimant be concerned that their broker does have that split loyalty? And the last question is, what do you look for in a mediator and an arbitrator? So sorry to have so many questions, but I
No,
just found this
great
so
question.
interesting.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. I think those are great questions, and I hope I'm going to remember what you what you asked me. So let me take it one by one. The first one was, should a broker go to a mediation for a plaintiff? We are typically our clients are typically the defendants in mediations or litigation. So I'd probably separate that out. The insurance is usually triggered for a defense of a client, unless they brought a claim and then suffered a counterclaim, in which case they could be a plaintiff, I guess. But yes, we are often asked to go with a client to a mediation because we may be familiar with the process, or we may be familiar with the other insurers that might be there as well. Insurers aren't always invited to come to the mediation, and sometimes it's probably a good thing if they're not at a mediation, because it may give the impression that, you know, a client's got loads of money and actually they might not have a huge tower of insurance. Sometimes insurers are there, and where it's a significant or complex event, our clients do tend to ask us to partner with them, depending on what the mediation's going to be about. Does that answer your question?
Um, I was, yes, in the States, the general assumption is that you've disclosed insurance and that a mediator will require all the insurers to appear. Is that
Yeah.
different from what you said?
In UK and correct, in US, although they I think I'm right in thinking sometimes they do have to disclose the insurances if that's been applied for. I'm not sure they're all obliged to show up for a mediation. Often a mediator will say, we expect any parties with authority to turn up at the mediation, so we make sure that we're actually making good use of the time, rather than a client turning up and saying, well, I haven't got any money, actually it's the insurers, I need to go phone them. Oh no, it's like sort of midnight where they are, so I can't get the authority. So insurers, where it's a big item, you know, will show up, or at least a lead will show up, rather than, you know, 25 insurers showing up, which sometimes becomes somewhat unwieldy and completely unmanageable. So yeah, I would say that that's probably right, and it depends on which insurance it is.
Question one answered.
Great. Okay. And then you said, is there one verification process that could be used? But I'm not sure I understood the question.
Well,
Do you
so
know
you've got,
what we would follow?
so let's say you've got a business interruption claim and
Mhm,
the primary carrier says, well, I've got to verify everything.
mhm.
And then you go to up the chain and the up the chain carrier says, well, I've got to verify everything and do my own independent. And the next thing you know, it's months and months and months. And can the broker somehow organize those and say, let's put together one verification process?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the policy wording, because obviously it's all contractually driven. We try to have a verification process in some of our biggest policies that we place, so that the client knows upfront and the insurers know upfront, we're going to have one adjuster that looks at a BI process. And at Aon, we have a group called the Claims Preparation Team, and they actually look at the BI process for both clients and insurers, depending on what the policy setup is. So there's kind of one team that are looking at it for both sides. Sometimes the insurers will then cross-check it. But yeah, I mean, in an ideal situation, we would have one verification process, so that the client doesn't have to deal with multiple adjusters and multiple verifications. But it doesn't always work that way. And sometimes, you know, in fact, I've had a recent occasion where even on the same layer, the insurers who were claims agreement parties separately from each other, even on the same layer, went to two different adjusting companies. And it becomes really, really tricky because the client is then having to deal with, what's happening with this insurer who's gone to XYZ firm that then issued this report, which is showing us one thing, and then another is gone to a different firm that's saying something slightly different, and how do the two meet? So as brokers, that we are obviously trying to help clients and help insurers and help the adjusters to make sure there's no disconnect, because
Question two
everyone is,
answered.
yeah, I'm sorry.
Answered. I got question two answered. I don't want to take up too much time because other people probably have questions, but that gives me the insight I needed.
Great. And then you asked about split loyalty. Our representation is for the client. It is not a representation for insurers. We have groups within Aon who are representing insurers, but as claims brokers, there is no conflict in that sense. I mean, of course, we do business with those insurers, but we are always, I would say, advocating rather than fighting on behalf of our clients. We're looking to get those claims paid.
Is there a formal split between the claims adjusters and the underwriters? Like in investment banks, sometimes you'll have a split because an investment bank might have loyalties going two ways. Do you have like a non-communication policy, or does the underwriter ever come back and say, hey, you're pushing too hard?
Oh yeah, we do get that regularly, where the underwriters will say, you're pushing too hard, and we said it's not covered, and therefore it isn't. And that kind of tension is absolutely expected and is there on a regular basis from an underwriting perspective. From a broking perspective, we have a regulatory opportunity and, of course, a contractual obligation to our clients to represent our clients. And our client is not the end insurer. So from a regulator's perspective, even the sort of chain of reporting is claims to claims. And it's typically that way on the underwriting side as well. The claims hierarchy escalates into the head of claims. They don't tend to escalate into an underwriting head because of that. I mean, at a senior level, at all organizations, it ultimately has to come together somewhere, but that is at a kind of global C-suite type level, and not at a working level that people are operating with.
And then last, what do you look for in mediators and arbitrators?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that it's probably not too dissimilar from the broking job, although you've obviously got you're in the middle of both, and you're not representing just one or representing just the other. But mediators have a tough job. I say that you've got to understand both sides. You've got to understand the arguments, and it really is trying to bring those parties together and make sure that they reach a resolution. So those are the most helpful mediators. I think sometimes it's difficult for independent clients where an insurer or a plaintiff might know a mediator very well, and the client who is facing a mediator for the first time ever doesn't have that relationship. So probably that's the trickiest part for the mediators. But I think largely it's a very, very important job that you all do, because it helps our clients to stay out of trials and courts, and that's usually where the biggest risks come in. So you do a phenomenal job.
And do you look for, we use a term, muscular mediator, someone who tries to pound people, take control, run it, as opposed to a facilitative mediator? Do you have a choice on what you prefer?
I mean, we would, it probably, that's a pretty broad question. Generally, I would always say we wouldn't want someone that's going to sort of, bang their fist on a table and say, well, I'm running the show, because actually the mediator job, in my view, is to facilitate an outcome. does everyone want exactly the same type of mediator? I don't know. I mean, if you're a plaintiff counsel, then ideally you want a mediator who's going to pound their fist and say, "I'm running the show," and then insurers, you're going to pay this. Um, but no, I mean that I don't think is the ideal outcome, because usually, if that doesn't resolve a situation, that tends to prolong it, and the parties end up typically then escalating, going to court, and that's sort of undermines the whole point of the mediation.
And then on arbitrators, do you keep a data set on arbitrators, or does Lloyd's, in terms of how often they rule in favor of carrier versus claimant?
I know that some insurers do. As brokers, we don't, because our clients, unless it's a coverage arbitration, which you know, we try to avoid. We tend not to as brokers, but certainly the carriers do. The
Okay,
larger carriers do. I'm not sure if all of them do.
thank you very much.
Very, very welcome.
Thank
Great
you.
questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter. Mona, a few minutes ago, I asked you what advice you would have for uh, insurance carriers, things you wish you had known. Now you're dealing with also with a lot of policyholder counsel who are probably, some are probably more reasonable than others, and some are probably more demanding than others. What advice would you have for the lawyers, for the policyholders, as they interact with you, the broker, and try to get you to advocate their cause with the carriers?
I would say that the most helpful thing that a client and their lawyers can do is be as open and transparent as you can be with your insurers, because they typically are not looking for reasons to not pay something. They're looking for us to help them to pay it. And I can't speak for every brokerage company, but certainly for Aon, insurers are our long-term partners, the ones that we deal with. And they're looking to make sure that our clients are looked after and paid for the right claims. And I tend to find that it really is a case of trust, building up trust. So we have many very significant clients, and some medium sized and some small clients. And it kind of doesn't matter the size. What matters is the approach. It matters that the insurer feels that they built up trust with that client early on in the process. Have they notified a claim early? Have they told the broker? Are they engaging with them? Are they open about what loss they may suffer? And this all goes to, and the trust works two ways, because actually sometimes it's the insurers who will say, "Oh, well, we need to go off and instruct counsel," which immediately makes the client feel as though, well, are they looking to get out of paying a claim? Which may not be the case. They might just need some extra assistance, or sometimes it's even more benign than that. It may be that they just don't have resources in their claims team, and they need some external help to get through a particularly tricky claim. But from a client perspective, they're not necessarily going to see it like that. So it's important for us to have that open dialogue with the insurer so we can translate it for the client. So yeah, I mean, I would say whether the client's got a lawyer or not got a lawyer, ideally a less adversarial approach when they're trying to work through an insurance issue, and involving us, because this is our daily dialogue with insurers. How do we make sure that the right claims get paid quickly, and we don't get stuck in a lawyer to lawyer exchange, which tends to end up in an impasse sometimes.
So you mentioned, Mona, the long-term relationships between you, the broker, and the carriers. And isn't that really the key? In a sense, we have in the United States saying from Theodore Roosevelt, "Walk softly and carry a big stick." Isn't the big stick for you ultimately that you can take the business uh, down the hall to some other underwriter in the London market? How do you how do you use that power strategically on behalf of your clients?
I mean, the client can place their business with whomever they want, and ultimately they're asking for our guidance. We gather data on how an insurer is performing. We gather anecdotal information from individuals that are dealing with those insurers. It's not just London. I mean, I'm looking at carriers, and many of the carriers that we are dealing with are global. So it doesn't really matter whether they're based in London or they're based in Chicago or they're based in Paris or Switzerland or where have you. It really matters that they can support our clients when they need them. And so we are working with those insurers all the time to give them that feedback and ranking them against other insurers to say, this is where you're doing a fabulous job. Here's where we found a few issues, and it may be that their team resourcing isn't there, or perhaps they've got a new IT system and so they aren't paying the claims as quickly as they typically would have done. We feed that back to clients who want to know which insurer should they place their business with, and we say, well, this is the data and the information that we gather. We would, kind of go with the insurers that you want to go with, and many of them know the insurers that they are working with. They've had good relationships with and had good experience with, but they'll probably also remember the ones that have made it really difficult for them to get a payment on a complex or significant claim, and ideally, do they want that experience again? And maybe at the end of the day they've actually got to the right result, but the process was so painful. It is not always an easy call for clients to know which insurer to place business with, and yes, could we just move could we move business from one to another? I mean, ideally that's not how we like to work. We're looking to work with our insurers and make sure that we've got the right insurers who are there with the right KPIs and paying claims. And we're always going to have situations where there's not total alignment on every single claim. That would be a bit unrealistic, but it's important that we're able to have an open dialogue with them. I think that's the piece that's the key to all of it. And we're looking really for the contract to respond to the right one. So we're also not looking for insurers to just pay every single claim that comes through their door. That would be unreasonable. But for the right ones, there to be a swift payment and resolution.
So breaking bad news to your own clients when a claim just isn't covered, that must be a challenging part of your job as well.
Indeed it is. Indeed it is. And not all clients want to hear that. Well, I think no clients want to hear that message. So that's probably the worst part of the job.
Any tricks, any tips on how to do it gracefully?
I mean, we like to think that our clients understand the way their contract's going to work, but sometimes they want it to cover all manner of things. So it probably expectation management and picking the moment and making sure that you're positioning it correctly and explaining and actually taking the time to explain. So again, it comes down to communication, taking the time to explain, why is this particular instance not covered, and how in future would it be covered, and is there something they could do to make sure it would have been covered in future.
We're running out of time. I have one last question, kind of, I think, pet peeve a lot of mediators talk about. You're dealing with a large claim. You know that you're going to get through the primary layer and into excess layers in order to get a large claim settled. And there's some carrier relatively low in the tower, perhaps at some intermediate level in the tower, and they just don't want to contribute. And then you've got, you're going to have to get up into higher layers, but somebody's just creating a log jam relatively low in the tower. What are suggestions for dealing with that situation?
My tip to the mediators is reach out to your brokers. because that's where they can come in and add a huge amount of value and unlock in a way that probably an external party isn't necessarily going to be able to do. Where insurers are just maybe digging their heels in, or maybe they've got a different policy wording, or there might be a good legitimate reason why that particular insurer isn't willing to pay. Perhaps they set a precedent for themselves if they paid this one particular loss. And how do you get through the logjam because all the excess insurers are saying, well, all underlying layers have to be fully eroded before our excess layer gets impacted. And we've all heard that clause. And so, you've got to break the logjam. And I think that's hopefully, if you've got a good broker on your side, they'll be able to navigate through that.
It's interesting because in the United States, I don't think we think that commonly about the involvement of the broker and the significance of the broker.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it's a changing marketplace. As I said, when I was sort of talking earlier, and clients more and more are understanding the value of the claims broker. They've placed the policy, but actually, how does it respond when they actually come to rely on it? So that's where the claims broker should come into the fore. And not all brokers are structured the same, but for Aon, I really am pushing the advocacy piece for claims. We're there to represent our clients, and we're there to make sure that we're dealing with insurers and helping where we can. So yeah, different insurers will probably go about it differently, but certainly, if you've got a strong broker, and there are many in the US side, Aon's one of them, and the best. So reach out to the Aon group if you've got them.
And finally, Mona, we're a bunch of mediators here listening to this very informative talk. If there was one thing that mediators could do to make your life better, happier, easier, what would it be?
Ooh, that's a broad question. Um, Probably, I mean, is it for mediators to make our life easier? It's probably not for mediators to make our life easier. It's probably for mediators to help our clients, and that would make our life easier. But yeah, I mean, we're there to facilitate the mediation as well if we're there, and help clients. But I'd probably go back again to the point that Peter was making earlier. Do you want someone who's banging their fist on a table? That doesn't help, because it immediately gets the clients back up. So that's not helpful. I'd certainly advocate against doing that. And really, yeah, look for early resolutions, and as much as you can in a non-partisan way, obviously.
Yes, if the process works well, I think that the heavy-handed tactics are simply not necessary, and the right settlement should just become obvious as the discussion ensues, and the right resolution should just become obvious from the frank discussion of the issues. Mona Barnes from Aon, this has just been a terrific conversation. Thank you so much. I think you educated a lot of people as to the critical role of brokers in resolving insurance disputes. I hope that people are motivated to contribute to the Trussell Trust in the United Kingdom that supports so many food banks and does so much to relieve food insecurity in your country. Thank you so much for this presentation. And with that, we are complete.